Hello YouTube, this is Dazza the cameraman. Today is Friday, September the 8th, 2017. Welcome along. This is a live hangout to discuss the September 23rd sign in the heavens that everybody is talking about. And at the moment I've got Paul from Anon along with me. Welcome Paul, how are you today?
I'm good, Dazza. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Now I say welcome along today, and of course it's just gone midnight your time, hasn't it?
Just turned midnight.
Right. These jolly time zones are a problem, aren't they? For a lot of people across the US at the moment, which of course is where most of the viewers are, it is actually late afternoon, early evening across their time zones. So yeah, these time zones can be a bit of a problem. A lot of the stuff happens when I'm fast asleep, of course. And I miss out on a lot of things too that I'd like to sit in on if it was live. But here we are, and so we're going to be looking at the September 23rd sign of the woman and the dragon in the sky. So I'm going to present my desktop again. Let me just pull that up. Please let me know in the chat how the audio is. Do we need to adjust the audio levels? Is Paul coming through at the same level? Just let me know if there are any problems, please, and I'll make adjustments if I need to. Okay, we should be seeing my screen in just a moment. I'll make sure that that is going live. There is a bit of a delay.
Yeah, I can see
Sounds
that.
good. Yep, okay, and I can see that my screen in the live feed there as well. Okay, so this is the view. I've set my viewing location to New York in the US, and this is the view at just after 4 p.m. today, September 7th. Now, I'm not sure if they're on daylight saving at the moment. If it is, it would be the sun would be down an hour further because we advanced the clock on. Okay, so as you can see at the moment, we've got Virgo in the sky and Jupiter is in the middle of Virgo. We've got the sun down below. Remember, this is at just after 4 p.m. So we're approaching sunset, late afternoon. We've got the sun above the head of Virgo, and we've got Mars, Mercury, and Venus above, or sort of, yeah, above Virgo, beyond the sun, if you follow what I mean. Okay, and I've just been told that daylight saving doesn't happen until the end of the month, so thank you. So we've got the correct time setting there. So the point of showing you this at the moment is that obviously if we went out and looked up in the sky in the middle of the day, and it's time here, in fact, it's just after 11 a.m. New Zealand time. If I went out into the daytime and looked up, of course, all I would see is the sun in the blue sky. I'm not going to see Virgo. I'm not going to see Jupiter or Mars or Mercury or Venus. Venus can be seen in the daytime sky if you know where to look, but it is actually pretty hard to pick out, and you can't do it if it's too close to the sun because the sun will drown it out anyway. So let's advance the time on and see what happens. I'm juggling two keyboards and a mouse here, so just bear with me. Okay, so as I advance time on, I'm going backwards, there we go. You can see that Virgo and the sun are getting lower, and Venus and Mercury and Mars are setting below the horizon. So the crown of 12 stars we're not going to see, because they're going to be below the horizon when the sun sets. Now, of course, this is today's date, so what I really need to do is go to the 23rd of September, because this is the date that everybody's talking about, of course. And 23rd of September, and we can see that the sun is in Virgo, we've got Jupiter there, and we've got the moon at the feet of Virgo. So this is referring to the prophecy in Revelation 12 that everybody's talking about, saying that Virgo will be clothed with the sun. So there is a sun, with the moon at her feet, and a crown of 12 stars. And this is what we're going to look at in more detail. So as I pointed out, in the daytime sky, the only thing that you're going to see is the sun. You're not going to see Virgo, you're not going to see Jupiter, you're not going to see Mercury, Mars, or Venus. But if we go back into the morning sky, so let me just back this out. And I'm going to run time backwards so that we're going back into the morning. Now, before the sun rises, as seen from this is the view from the northern hemisphere. Before the sun rises, when the sky is still dark, you will see Venus, Mars, and possibly Mercury. I'm not sure, you may or may not, yeah, you probably will see Mercury because it's probably going to be still dark enough before sunrise. So you're going to see Venus, Mars, and Mercury, but you're not going to see Virgo. And as I advance the time on and the sun comes up, you're going to see the sun, but you're not going to see Virgo. And then you're not going to be able to see Venus, Mars, and Mercury because they're now in the daytime sky and they're drowned out by sunlight. Okay. And then as we progress across again, so the sun is crossing the sky and back to the sunset, which is where we started. And as I pointed out, Mercury, Mars, and Venus are going to be below the horizon, so you're not going to see the crown of stars. And all you're going to see of Virgo after the sun is set and the sky is dark enough, you will see Jupiter, and you'll see the moon in the evening sky, and you'll see the bottom half of Virgo. So the point that I'm making here is that at any time in the sky, you're not going to look up and see this whole sign in the sky of Virgo clothed with the sun, with the moon at its feet, and a crown of 12 stars. Because obviously with Virgo clothed with the sun, it means that it's daytime. If we can see the sun, it's daytime, and we can't see Virgo. We can only ever see above Virgo or the bottom half of Virgo. We can only see part of the sign. So let's change the view now. And if there are any questions or anything, Paul, are you able to watch the chat as well? And just let me know if there are any questions I need to respond to. So I'm going to change this to the center of the Earth now. And I'm going to change our orientation so it doesn't flip about on me like it does when we're viewing locally. I'm changing this to an ecliptic view. Okay. And so you can see that the constellations, the constellations of the zodiac, I've got them labeled there. We can see Saturn. And here is Virgo. Let me make sure I've turned off the daylight. I need to hide the daylight. And this is 23rd of September. Let me change this to UTC. Looks like it's frozen on me. Okay, this is, oh, hang on, cancel. Window popped up in my other screen, so I need to just change display universal time. Okay, so I'll put this on the 23rd UTC. So again, we can see that the sun is in Virgo, Jupiter is here, the moon is at her feet, and we've got Mercury, Mars, and Venus above the head of Virgo. So people are saying, and let me just flick over to this website here. I meant to bring this up at the beginning. This is a very good article on Earth Sky, and you'll find a link in the description area. Biblical Signs in the Sky. And this is a reposted article that was originally printed at the Catholic Astronomer, reprinted here with permission. So this article is actually written by an astronomer, and he goes through these signs. And here is a collection of some of the images that are doing the rounds on the internet regarding this event on September 23rd. And you can see that one of the claims is that this is a once in 7,000 year event. occurring on 23rd of September 2017. Well, in fact, it isn't. It's not a once in 7,000 year event by any stretch, and we're going to look at that. And the other thing that we're going to look at is the number of stars in Leo, because what has been presented is that there are 9 stars in the constellation of Leo, and they've been joined by the 3 planets to make up a crown of 12 stars. Well, that's true and it isn't true. It depends which version of Leo that you're looking at. And let's just go back to Starry Night again. And I'll just pull up Leo. Okay, so there's Leo, the lion. And just change that back. And I'm also going to bring up a different view, constellations, zodiac. Yep, that's what I want. So this view here of Leo actually agrees with what many of the people are saying about 9 stars. If we count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 stars. Now, if I turn on the boundaries for the constellations, here is the boundary for the constellation of Leo. And if you look carefully, I don't know if you can see that very well on your screen, especially in preview, but we can see that there are actually a lot more stars in the constellation boundary of Leo than what we're seeing here. And not only that, if we look at some of the other renderings of Leo and count the stars, we see that there is a difference. For example, this one here actually has a bunch of stars in it. This is the most stars I've ever seen. But many of the others actually have maybe 10 or 11 stars instead of 9. So, for example, this one here, let's count them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in that one. And I thought that one actually had 10. Some of these do. Let me see. Is it this one here? That one looks the same. There are a bunch of these I was looking at earlier. Did I count that right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That one will have 9 by the looks of it. That one looks like 9. This one here, I think that's 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so there we go. And in this article, if we scroll down, he's actually shown a couple of examples as well. So this one here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 stars. This one here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 stars. So it really depends which rendering of Leo that you're using. It may have 9 prominent stars, 10 prominent stars, or 11 prominent stars, or even more, as we saw with that one there. So let's go back to Starry Night, and we can see that they have indeed marked out the 9 prominent stars. But if we look at the boundaries of Leo, we see that there are, in fact, more other bright stars that are in there. In fact, this one down here is sometimes marked out as a front leg of Leo the lion. Okay. All right, so there's that. Now I'm just going to turn off some of the clutter there. I'll leave these up just so that we can see what else we're looking at. Now, the question that we really need to get down to is, how rare is this event? The claim that we saw was that this is a 1 in 7,000 year event. Is that true? Well, no, it's not. And we're going to look at why it's not. But first of all, we need to cover some basics. So here we have Virgo clothed with the sun. Well, that sounds very mysterious, doesn't it? How often does that happen? How often is Virgo clothed with the sun? Well, in fact, that happens at the same time every year. It happens in late September, early October every year. And I can prove that to you by changing the date here. We're currently on 2017. So I'm going to step through a few years. I'll go backwards first. So that's 2016, 2015. Let me move my cursor so you can see it more clearly. 2014, 2013, 2012, 2011. So you can see that the sun is in Virgo in the same position each time. Now you'll notice that that the sun is actually doing a little step there as I go back, and if you count it carefully, you'll notice that it's 4 times and then it jumps back. 1, 2, 3, 4, and it jumps back. 1, 2, 3, 4, and it jumps back. And that, of course, is because of leap years. So there's 365 and a quarter days in a year, and then we have to add an additional day in February every 4 years, the 29th of February, which is our leap year. So that is why it's actually jumping back like that every 4th year. Okay, so the sun is in Virgo. It doesn't matter what date I pick, because at the moment I'm on the 23rd of September, and let me just pull that date back, and if I do the same thing, yep, I saw that pull, I'll come right back to that. I'll go forward this time. Okay, so I've changed the date. We're on October the 3rd, but you can see as I step through the years, then the sun is still in Virgo at around about the same time. Okay. Now, just give me a minute. Okay. Can you comment for me, please, in the chat, Paul? I'll do it in there.
Yeah, sure, no problem. One thing I just want to say also, and I just add a little bit to that, Dazza, is the planetary alignments don't actually line up in one straight line because of the way the orbits of the planets actually work. So it's merely impossible to have one straight line. And this is this is a problem that people don't understand. They think automatically when they hear an alignment, you know, it's just one straight line of planets, but that's not actually true. The mathematics and the laws of physics don't allow that to actually happen.
Yeah, that's true. We're talking about something a little bit different here, though. You're absolutely right about the planetary alignments. But what we're looking at here is not an alignment as such, but certainly when we do have planets that appear to be in a straight line, when we're looking down on a map of the solar system or whatever, as you say, they're not in a straight 3D alignment.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. So if you can just make a comment in the chat there, and I'll add you as an admin. So that's the sun in Virgo, and as I say, it happens at the same time every year. So that's nothing unusual at all. And next we're going to look at the moon. So the second part of this sign in Revelation is that Virgo has the moon, or the woman, the virgin, described in Revelation 12, has the moon at her feet. So let me change the date back to September 23rd. And we can see that we've got the moon down there near the feet of Virgo. That's on the 22nd. Let me change that. There we go, 23rd. And the moon is at her feet. Well, how often is the moon at the feet of Virgo? Well, in fact, it happens every approximately 27 days. So let's check that out as well. And I'm going to change this to days, and I'm going to put in 27. And I'm going to step this through 27 days at a time. Okay, so I'm going to go backwards in time. And you can see that the moon is down there. It's slowly drifting away. Let me bring that back to 26 days. I'll just pull that forward. Okay, so I'll step that back. Maybe I need to make that 28. There's a difference in our reckoning with the lunar month. So, you know, to go from new moon to new moon or full moon to full moon is 29.5 days. But reckoning against the stars is 27.3 days. That's sidereal time. August, September, 23rd. Okay, I'm not sure I put 23rd in there, but it keeps coming up 22nd. All right, so we get the moon at the feet. Let's make that 28 days. Because it's an in-between as well, that makes it more complicated. All right, so you can see that the moon is there and it's slowly drifting. So if I went 27.5 days, it would pretty much remain. I can't do 27.5, I can only do a whole number here. But you can see the point here that even in July, we've got the moon in Virgo, and if I just bring the date back or forward a little bit there. So on July the 3rd, 2017, we had the moon at the feet of Virgo. Let me step this back again another month. And on the 6th of June 2017, we had the moon at the feet of Virgo. And step it back again. And on May the 9th, 2017, we had the moon at the feet of Virgo. So again, it's nothing particularly unusual. So we've covered the sun. The sun is in Virgo at the same time every year, which is late September, early October. The moon is at the feet of Virgo approximately every 28 days, 27.5 against the stars. Now, the next thing that we have to look at, which is a lot more of a rare event, is the crown of 12 stars. And this is what really seems to make the sign, because as we looked at the start, we've got this normally a crown of 9 stars if we take those 9 prominent stars in Leo. And as I said, depending which rendering of Leo you use, this may have 9 stars, 10 stars, 11 stars, or maybe even more. But let's go with the 9 stars, and let's bring this back to the 23rd. And it's done it again. I just typed in 23rd on my keyboard and it's brought up. Must be because of UTC or something like that. Okay, so here we have Mercury, Mars, and Venus joining these 9 prominent stars in Leo. And this is what people are talking about when they talk about the crown of 12 stars. So we've got Virgo clothed with the sun, with the moon at her feet, and a crown of 12 stars. And she's giving birth to Jupiter. And we're going to come back to the giving birth bit later as well. So this is indeed a fairly rare event to have all of this sort of come together like this, especially with a crown of 12 stars. And the claim has been made that this is a once in 7,000 year event. Well, is that the case? Let's take a look at the article from Earth Sky again and see what they had to say. And again, you can find a link to this article, Biblical Signs in the Sky, by earthsky.org. You'll find the link in the description area and in the first pinned comment. So he has actually gone through and checked for other alignments, if you want to call them that. It's not really an alignment, but we can call it that. And he has actually found that this basic arrangement has happened before at least 4,000 times, sorry, at least 4 times in the last 1,000 years. And he's possibly missed a few. Unless you're using a clever piece of software, maybe Astronomy Live could come up with something that would do it. It will actually automatically pull out the dates for you and show you the arrangements. You have to go through manually, and it is quite time consuming. You would have to go through the month of September each year for however many years you want to go through. And if we're talking about the last 1,000 years, well, you've got 1,000 years to go through, haven't you? You can narrow it down because Jupiter has an orbital period around the sun of 11.86 years. So you would need to step back approximately every 11 or 12 years to check. So that would help to narrow it down. But he states here in his article that this basic arrangement has happened before in September 1827, in September 1483, in September 1293, and in September 1056. So we're going to check those and see how that works out and see if what he's stating is actually correct. Now, he also points out that he only went back 1,000 years. And there's every reason to believe that this arrangement would occur at least another 4 times in the previous 1,000 years. Okay, so if you're talking about 7,000 years, and let's assume that this has happened 4 times in 1,000 years, 7 4s are 28. That would mean that it's actually happened 28 times in the last 7,000 years. So that discredits this claim that it's a once in 7,000 year event. But let's test that, because don't take my word for it. We need to check. So the first one that we're going to look at is September 1827. So back to Starry Night, we've got September 23rd. And I've got a memory like a goldfish sometimes. I already forgot that date, 1827. So let me put that in, 1827. And what have we got? Now this, I've already looked at this one, and I have to say this one is a little bit dubious for me because of the boundaries and where everything is, but the other 3 are more interesting. So in September 23rd, 1827, we can see that we've got Virgo clothed with the sun, we've got Jupiter in the womb of Virgo, we've got the moon at her feet, and we've got Venus at her head, and Mars in Leo, and Saturn is way over here. So let me run this forward though, and of course I can't run it too far forward, because if I go more than a day either side, then the moon is actually not going to be at the feet of Virgo. So let's have a look at that. It's the 23rd of September on 1827. And I've just gone to the 24th, and you can see that Venus and Mars is there. That making a difference of 1 or 2 days either way is not going to make a huge difference to bringing a 3rd planet into this alignment. But having said that, remember what we said about the rendering of Leo. Now this rendering has 9 stars in it, but as we saw, some of the renderings of Leo actually have 10 stars or even 11 stars. So depending which rendering of Leo we cherry pick, for example, this one here, I could say, well, yeah, I used the rendering of Leo that's got 10 stars, plus Mars and Venus is 12. So we still have a crown of 12 stars. So you could see how I could actually cherry pick that to have it suit what I want to claim by using Leo with 10 stars instead of 9. This, I could do the same thing if we only had 1 planet in Leo, which is above Virgo. If I use the rendering of Leo that has 11 stars, then I could add 1 planet and say, look, a crown of 12 stars. But anyway, let's stick with this rendering, which has 9 stars, because this is the claim that's been made. And we will check the, where is it? Check the next date, which is September 1483. September 1483. So let me bring that back to the 23rd again, and I'm going to change this to 1483. Bingo, that's a really good one. Okay, and I've got to bring the moon back in there because the moon is not at Virgo's feet. So let's find out where the moon is. It can't be too far away. There it is. And which way do we need to go? We need to go this way. So here comes the moon. So there is the moon at Virgo's feet. Now I wonder if I need, yeah, I think we need to go back, because we're now into October the 3rd, and I think we need to go back the other way so that we're into September there. Let's just bring that right back to the beginning of September. So when the moon comes back round, there's the moon, okay? So the moon is at the feet of Virgo. Now this is September the 5th, 1483. Let me zoom in on that for you. September the 5th, 1483, we've got Virgo clothed with the sun. We've got Jupiter in the womb of Virgo. We've got the moon at the feet of Virgo. We've also got Saturn down there as well. And what do we see? Mars, Mercury, and Venus. So we've got our 9 stars of Leo joined with Mars, Mercury, and Venus to make up our crown of 12 stars. So that to me is a definite hit. That's a match for all of those criteria. Okay. If anyone disagrees with that, please let me know in the chat. And Paul, are you still watching the chat for us? If you see any comments I need to respond to, please jump in and let me know.
Yeah, will do. There's a couple of questions there, Dazza.
Yep.
John Michelson, I'm not sure exactly what he means, but he says, can you do 660 hours, Dazza? If John
I don't know what that.
Yeah, if John could actually explain a bit further what he actually means.
Yeah. Okay, so that was 1483. So we'll look at the next one, which is September 1293. September 1293, and so we're on September 1293. And again, we're going to have to set this so that the moon is at the feet, and there it is. It's almost right there. Which way do we have to go? This way. So on September the 4th, 1293, we've got Virgo clothed with the sun. We've got the moon at her feet. We've got Jupiter in her womb. And bingo, we've got Venus, Mars, and Mercury in the constellation of Leo, joining those 9 stars to make up a crown of 12 stars. So again, we've met the criteria of the woman being clothed with the sun, with the moon at her feet, and crowned with a crown of 12 stars. So that is now at least 2 out of 3 that we've looked at. Let's look at the next one. And the final one that yep, go ahead. Sorry,
Dazza. John says there, could you set it for your time instead of fractional days in Starry Night Pro?
For his time?
Your time.
Well, John I've set it to I've set it to UTC. Up there it says UT, which is basically GMT or London time. I can set it to my time. The only difference that will make is a difference of 12 hours. So if I'm understanding you correctly, it really makes no difference. It's only a difference of 12 hours, and that's not going to make any difference to our view. You can see that the date is here and so on. So we're just dealing with ordinary dates. We're not dealing with anything strange. UTC is basically the same as London time or UK time, okay, unless you're on daylight saving.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and there's a comment there. Keep in mind also that Jupiter must be in retrograde. We're going to come back to that. I'll cover that as well. If I don't remember, please prompt me, but I intend to cover that as well. Okay.
Yeah, there's another message there too, Dazza, from our flat. He asks, how does the September 23rd alignment compare to the 5th of the 5th, 2000 alignment that people were saying was the end of the world?
Okay, I can come back to that. I think we're talking about a planetary alignment there. And in fact, there was no actual planetary alignment. There were a bunch of planets that were on the same side of the solar system within a field of several degrees, but there certainly was no alignment of the planets, as some people had suggested. I can remember in the lead up to, I think it was 1982, if I remember correctly, there was supposed to be this big planetary alignment, and I remember a friend of my father's was talking about this. I was quite young at that time, and he was expecting all these major earthquakes and volcanic eruptions and all sorts of things that happen, and of course it never happened at all. If I had the tools and the tools back then and the knowledge that I have now, I would have been able to show him that. But anyway, we've got one more to check from this article, which was September 1056. So let's go back to Starry Night and change that to 1056. And let's find out where the moon is at. And here comes the moon. So I could, oops, on the right button there, September 14. And so it looks to me like either the 15th, I'm going to change that back to UTC, by the way. Okay, so either the 14th or the 13th, or halfway in between, the moon would have been exactly at the feet. Let's go for this one here. Again, we've got Virgo clothed with the sun, moon at her feet, and we've got Mars, Mercury, and Venus at her head, crown of 12 stars. I'm going to also try this one the following month, early October. Let's see how that works. So I need to go back. No, it will be late August. Okay, so the sun is moving out of Virgo, so that one's not going to work. So we stick with September. So around about the 13th or 14th of September UTC on 1056, we've got the moon at her feet, we've got Virgo clothed with the sun, we've got a crown of 12 stars with Venus, Mercury, and Mars joining those 9 prominent stars in Leo. Okay. So now what I'm going to cover, just let me know in the chat, do you feel that has sort of really addressed the claims that this is a once in 7,000 year event? We can see from Starry Night that this has happened before in September 1827, in September 1483, in September 1293, and in September 1056. So there's 4 times in the last 1,000 years. And as the author of this article points out, he only went back 1,000 years, and there's possibly a few that he may have missed as well. Okay. Okay, and Harvey Chuckle says, Dazza the cameraman, I heard some people making noises about the length of time Jupiter is in Virgo's belly prior to the 23rd, making it unique, human gestation period or something. And that is the next thing that I actually want to cover. And I've looked at this already, so let's check that out. Now, bearing in mind that Jupiter takes almost 12 years to make one orbit around the sun, and there's 360 degrees in a circle, then it's obviously going to take some time for Jupiter to pass through any constellation. But let's have a look and see how long it takes Jupiter to pass through in past years. So I'll bring this right back to current. This is the current view. Now, this is where Jupiter is right now. So I'm going to lock on to Jupiter. And I'll turn on the boundaries as well. So this is the boundary for the constellation of Jupiter. And I'm going to bring this back to when Jupiter was just entering the boundary of the constellation of Virgo. And you see that little retrograde motion there. Okay. So I've got Jupiter right on the edge of the boundary, as shown in Starry Night, on August the 8th, 2016. Now, it's important to make a note of that date, August the 8th, 2016, or August 2016. And now I'm going to progress this forward, and you'll see the retrograde motion that happens as well. Hopefully this won't go too fast for me. So remember that we're centered on Jupiter, so we're going to be following Jupiter. I'm going to run this forward now from August 8th, 2016. There's Jupiter doing a little pause. Now it's going retrograde and turning around, and now it's heading back and back out of Virgo. So by November 15, 2017, we're right on that boundary heading out of Virgo again. So that is a period of time from August 2016 to November 2017. So August, September, October, November, that's 12 months plus 3 months, that's 15 months. So it's certainly a lot longer than 9 months, but I think that what people are focusing on is the period of time when Jupiter is more in the womb of Virgo, if you like. So I'm going to run that back again. We'll take another look at that. I find it quite funny too that as Jupiter is heading southwards, so to speak, out of the womb, it turns around and starts heading back in the opposite direction, as if it's almost as if Jupiter doesn't want to be born.
Yeah,
Saying,
exactly.
I'm not coming out of here just yet. I'm heading back in the other direction. So I think that's quite funny. All right. So what we need to work out is at what point do we decide that Jupiter is in the womb of Virgo? Because we can see that Jupiter is passing down there. It's probably at about a breast height at that stage. And so now we're maybe mid-torso there. You know, it's hard to say at what point do we start. Maybe if I start here, so that's November 6, 2016, and running it forward. I'm just going to see where the retrograde motion starts here. So you can see that Jupiter is really heading south here. You know, it's on its way up and must be going retrograde very soon. Well, look, it's down past the hips already. Okay, so Jupiter's just gone retrograde now. So do you remember what date I said, Paul, when we picked our starting point there?
I don't, Dazzle, because I was on the chat here sorting stuff out.
Okay. If anyone can remember in the chat what date I said that we picked when we said, okay, well, the starting date for Jupiter being in the womb, if you can just post that in the chat, because as I said, I've got a memory like a goldfish for things like that. Okay, so here we are on February 2nd now, so somebody might want to just type that into the chat. So we started with November 6th. Thank you, Chicken Little. November the 6th. We're now on February the 2nd, and Jupiter has just gone retrograde. And now Jupiter is deciding, I'm not out of here just yet. I'm actually heading back. I'm heading back inside here. So there's Jupiter heading in the opposite direction. And this is actually, in case you're wondering how this can happen, this is actually because of the motion of the Earth around the Sun and our relative viewing position to Jupiter. And I'll show you again a little bit later on that we'll see this retrograde motion every 6 months because of the motion of the Earth around the Sun. So I'll keep going. Now, where are we? Is it slowing down? Yeah, it's starting to slow down. So we can see at this point on June the 7th that we're right back to this point here, and Jupiter is slowing down and starting to head back in the other direction again now. So let's keep going. So from this point on, Jupiter continues on out of Virgo. This is August 22nd and end of August 31st. And interesting thing is that, you know, they say September 23rd because it has to be September 23rd because that is the date when Virgo has the moon at her feet. But what do we see on September 23rd when the moon is at her feet? There is the moon at the feet of Virgo, but where is Jupiter now? Jupiter's down by her knee. So, you know, at what point did she start giving birth? Because at this point on September 23rd, Jupiter's already down to a knee. Let's go back in time again. So, end of August, August 31st, looks to me like Jupiter's already been born there. I need to go backwards. You know, so I guess we sort of had that false birth, didn't we, when Jupiter went retrograde? It started heading back in the opposite direction. But from about this point here, around about June the 10th, then Jupiter is actually heading south again after previously going retrograde. So I would have to say that this is the point where Virgo is actually giving birth to Jupiter properly. Because from this point on, Jupiter doesn't turn around and head back in the opposite direction. So this is June the 10th, and we've got Jupiter heading downwards. And, you know, looking at the illustration there, to be fair, I guess it depends whether we're looking at the illustration, and the illustration is not official. Different astronomy software, different zodiacs and so on will use different renditions of Virgo. I suppose what we need to be looking at is this asterism of the constellation here, and I guess that line there would have to be the bottom of her torso, so to speak, and these are her legs. So we've got Jupiter right at the bottom of the torso in this asterism of the constellation, which is September 8th. So does this mean that Virgo is giving birth on September 8th? But it's only on September 23rd that we see Virgo clothed with the sun, with the moon at her feet. And that's the key point, is when the moon is at her feet, and that is on the 23rd of September. So I'll run that forward again. In fact, it's interesting because look at where the sun is. You know, we're trying to pull all of these different components of the sign. You've got clothed with the sun, the moon at her feet, a crown of 12 stars, and giving birth to Jupiter. Well, we can see that she's already giving birth to Jupiter, but where is the sun? The sun is still in Leo at this point. This is September the 5th, and the sun is in Leo. It's not even in Virgo. So Virgo is not even clothed with the sun when she's giving birth. So, you know, I guess the point is that we can really cherry pick what we want to pull out of this. And if we went back to those previous dates that we've already looked at 4 times in the last 1,000 years, we could also cherry pick those ones as well and say, well, look, you know, Virgo is giving birth to Jupiter. She's clothed with the sun. She's got the moon at her feet. She's got a crown of 12 stars and all the rest of it. So it is cherry picking, isn't it? So
it is.
Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I was just going to say it is cherry picking because basically 4 times in the last 1,000 years has been accounted for, and you know, numerous times before the Bible was even written. How many times has it occurred also? Yeah,
that's right. And as I pointed out at the beginning, the claim has been made that this is a once in 7,000 year event. Well, if this is happening 4 times in 1,000 years, then that's 28 times in the last 7,000 years, which makes a nonsense of the claim.
Exactly.
So,
how long has man been around before that?
Yeah. So for this all to come together, of course, we need to have Virgo clothed with the sun. And at the moment, the sun is in Leo, not in Virgo. So we need to run this forward again. And now we have the sun in the boundary of the constellation of Virgo. That's by around about September 17. And of course, the key date, as I keep saying, is the 23rd of September, when the moon is at the feet of Virgo. And we can see that Jupiter is already way down here. Now, some might consider that this is the womb here, this line. Well, I guess you could argue it that way. But I think we could also argue, as we've already shown, that this arrangement has actually happened 4 times in the last 1,000 years, at least. As the author pointed out, he may have missed some as well, because it is quite a task to go through and check these. I actually had a go at checking these several months back, and I just didn't have the concentration or the energy to go through it. So I was actually quite pleased when I saw that this article was published. There were some comments underneath this article as well, and I did scroll down through them to see if anybody had added in the comments any other dates that might be available. Okay, the other thing that we were going to look at is the retrograde motion of Jupiter and how long it takes Jupiter to actually pass through the constellations. So I'm going to look at that now. So we're still centered on Jupiter, and it's still on days. I'm going to run this backwards. We're on September 23rd, 2017. And remember that it takes Jupiter almost 12 years to make one orbit around the sun. So let's run this back while I'm talking, and you can see that retrograde motion, which fair enough is in the womb of Virgo, but you'll see that Jupiter makes this retrograde motion every several degrees across the sky. And as I pointed out, this is because of the motion of the Earth around the sun and our relative viewing position to Jupiter. There's a very good video I meant to pull up, which actually explains this motion that we're seeing. So just checking the time up the top, December, we're going back in time here, August, July, June, May, April, March, February, January, December, November, October. So you can see that this retrograde motion is actually it's something that's happening all the time with Jupiter over 6 months. If I locked onto any of the other planets, you'd also see the retrograde motion, looking at those outer planets as well. So I'm going to let this run through until we get back to Virgo. We're up to 2008 now, so Virgo's not too far away. There goes our sun, and here comes Virgo again. So this retrograde motion is completely normal. It's exactly what should be happening. And is Jupiter doing its retrograde? So it's going to be interesting to see if we see a retrograde in the womb again. And I would say, yep, I would say there's retrograde in the womb again. And that was in 2004. So again, the retrograde in the womb is nothing unique about this arrangement. So the other thing I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to measure the distance across the sky, because at the moment we've really got no perspective to judge. You know, we're looking at an illustration and so on. So I'm going to measure this. And let me pull this back to now. And I'll make that September 23rd again. Here we go. So there's Jupiter, and I'm going to measure the angle here. This is Starry Night version 6, by the way, in case anybody's wondering. Now I'm going to measure this across where Jupiter is running along this line here. In fact, I'll turn on the ecliptic. That's the ecliptic line. So I'm going to measure across the ecliptic here. And we are looking at approximately 40, well, it's 43 degrees. So close enough to 45 degrees. That's measuring across the ecliptic from boundary to boundary. If we go back as far as around about where the feet is, or the feet are, I should say, up to the head, then we're spanning an angular distance of almost 50 degrees of sky. Okay, so just remember, you know, from the ground to looking straight up is 90 degrees. If you're looking at an angle halfway up into the sky from the ground, you're looking at an angle of 45 degrees to the ground. So that gives you some sort of scale of the large distance across the sky that we're actually looking at when we're looking at Virgo. And the moon, by comparison, is an angular distance of approximately half of 1 degree across in diameter. Okay, so April Perkins has just asked the question, so Dazza, are you proving that the sign is the sign or is not the sign, just to be clear? Okay, so I know that some people may have joined in late and haven't heard what I've already covered. So just to reiterate, what we've already established by confirming with Starry Night is that this so-called sign of the woman being clothed with the sun, with the moon at her feet, and a crown of 12 stars giving birth to Jupiter has actually happened at least 4 times in the last 1,000 years. And possibly more, because the author of this article, who actually went through and checked for these alignments or arrangement, if you like, said that he only went back 1,000 years, and he actually may have missed a few as well. So the claim again was that this is a once in 7,000 year event, but in fact we find that it's happened at least 4 times in the last 1,000 years. So over 7,000 years, that would mean that it would have happened 28 times in 7,000 years. So it's not anything unique. And you know, the Bible scriptures in Genesis, it does say that God created the sun and the moon and the stars to serve as for signs and seasons. And there are also other scriptures in the Bible that talk about the stars being for signs. And this is why people are looking to this sort of thing like with Virgo. But, you know, the point that I've made before as well is that with these other dates, you could have equally argued back in September 1827 that this was a fulfillment of Revelation 12, with the woman clothed with the sun, the moon at her feet, and a crown of 12 stars giving birth to Virgo. You would have said the same thing in 1483. You would have said the same thing in September 1293. And you would have said the same thing in September 1056. So what makes September 23, 2017 any more unique than those other dates, and possibly all the other dates that we haven't covered? You have any comments on that, Paul?
Yeah, there's April Perkins says here, she's confused because the time frame doesn't add up, the lines don't add up, the alignments don't add up. You just shown us. Can you explain that a little bit further? Now, one thing, April, I want to add to that is this has nothing to do with planetary alignments. You know, even if it was to do with planetary alignments, they don't add up in a straight line anyway, because the laws of physics and the orbits of the planets don't allow for that to happen. But you can just explain a bit more about the time frame doesn't add up and the lines don't add up.
Yeah, I'm confused about that too, because we're using professional astronomy software here, and what we see in this simulation in Starry Night is exactly what is going on in the sky. The boundaries and the lines are correct. They, you know, this is as I say, professional astronomical software. The renderings are correct. you could possibly use different renderings of Virgo, because indeed there are different renderings. Stellarium has a different rendering as well. And April says that that's not what she meant. So I guess we'd need more of an explanation from you, April, to try and understand what you're saying. So the uniqueness is that it falls on the Jewish festival of trumpets. Is never aligned up to fit biblical end times sign in Revelation 12:12. Okay, well, something very important to understand about the Jewish feasts, the festival of trumpets and so on, is that the Jewish calendar is all centered around the moon. Okay, and for example, the Passover is always on the full moon, or the 14th day of Nisan. Okay, and so we've got the moon at the feet. So my point is that because festivals are all tied up with the moon, new moon, full moon, and so on, it's not unusual for something to coincide with the full moon or the feast, the Jewish feast or whatever. So, for example, I mentioned the Passover. If anybody didn't understand that point, they might think, wow, that's amazing. The Passover this year falls on a full moon. Well, the Passover does fall on a full moon because that's how the calendar works. The 14th day of Nisan, the 14th day from the new moon. So it's really nothing unusual as I see it.
Yeah, April is just saying here, Daza, that the retrograde occurs on 1 year in Leo and not just Virgo.
Well, I don't understand that statement either. The retrograde occurs on 1 year in Leo, not just Virgo. I don't know, April, were you watching when I ran Jupiter forward and we looked at the retrograde motion over a period of what was it, 12 years? We went back to 2004 and we could see that Jupiter was doing its little spin. Yep. Okay. So I really don't understand that comment either, because let me just run that back. Let's look at that again. And let's check out that retrograde motion. So I need to change this to days. And let me pull this back. Which way am I going to go? Let's go back in time.
Yeah, if you go back to where you were from 2004 and explain that again, Daza, it'll probably help.
Okay, I'll go back to 2004. So we're back in 2004 now. I'm going to center on Jupiter. Now, please watch carefully the motion of Jupiter as Jupiter passes through the constellations, and we're currently in Leo. In fact, let me bring this back even further. No, it's going to go the other way, so it's going to head in the opposite direction anyway. I want you to follow the retrograde motion as it passes through the constellations. So let's run this forward. We're starting from March 24th, 2004. So I'm running this forwards now. So you can see that there's a retrograde motion there in Leo, and now it's heading into Jupiter. This is 2005. It's a retrograde motion in the womb of Virgo. And now we're into 2006. There's a retrograde motion in Libra. (2007), there's a retrograde motion there. We're just in between one of the zodiacs. We're just above Scorpio there. Scorpio's down below. 2008, there's retrograde motion in Sagittarius. 2009, and there's a retrograde motion in Capricorn. And 2010, we're under Pisces and Aquarius, mainly Pisces there, retrograde motion. 2011, we're We're into Aries now, and there is your retrograde motion, 2011. Now into 2012, moving into Taurus. There's your retrograde motion. It's now 2013. Moving into Gemini. There is your retrograde motion. Into Cancer. And into Leo. So that retrograde motion is halfway between Cancer and Leo on the boundary there. And again, there's going to be a retrograde motion in Leo. There it is, just starting now. And we're now into 2016. Back into Virgo, coming up for this year. Now into 2017, there's your retrograde motion in the womb again, just as it was in 2005. So there's nothing unusual there. So I hope that has helped clear that up. And I should point out too that, of course, with the constellations of the zodiac, there are 12 signs of the zodiac, and it takes Jupiter approximately 12 years, 11.86 years, to make one orbit around the sun. So it's no surprise that we're seeing one retrograde motion per constellation. Nothing unusual there.
Yeah, so it basically takes Jupiter 1 year to travel through the constellations, roughly.
It takes 12 years. So we're going from 2005 through to 2017.
Yeah.
Okay. So I hope that's cleared that up. Let me just pull the chat back up in the window there. Nope, only 7 months. I guess it was a premium that year. What was that about? March to October is 7 months. So what was the point there? I think anyway that we can see that I believe there's a lot of cherry picking that's going on. Just as I said, we could have cherry picked this. We could have gone back to any of those dates, those 4 dates that we looked at in the last 1,000 years, and made a very strong case that this was fulfillment of Revelation 12, based on everything that we've seen. And if anybody's just joined us, you might want to watch the video from the beginning, because we did exactly that. We scrutinized the same sort of alignment on previous dates in September over the last 1,000 years, and we see pretty much the same thing.
I just want to mention here, Dazza, Paddy Daly has said that now I don't believe in Nibiru, but I've seen channels saying that Nibiru will destroy Jupiter. Your thoughts, please.
Well, if anybody can send me the right ascension and declination coordinates for Nibiru, because if it's a real object, it must have right ascension and declination coordinates, because I can give you the right ascension and declination coordinates for every known object in the sky, every known object in the universe, basically. You know, I can give you the right ascension and declination coordinates for asteroids and comets and planets and moons and things like that, but nobody is ever able to give me the right ascension and declination coordinates for Nibiru, Planet X. The reason is, of course, is because it doesn't exist. As soon as something is detected by astronomers, they can take a few astrometric measurements and calculate its orbit, its trajectory. And Astronomy Live is very good at this too. I mean, the math involved is way beyond my level of ability, but Astronomy Live can actually take his own observations of objects in space and actually do the calculations himself and provide the correct trajectory and right ascension and declination coordinates for that object. But nobody is ever able to provide me with the right ascension and declination coordinates for Nibiru. So the question is Nibiru going to crash into and destroy Jupiter? Well, how can you have something destroyed by an object that nobody can actually locate? if somebody can actually make the prediction that it's going to crash into Jupiter or even into the Earth, then they obviously must have some information about its trajectory, because you can't actually make that sort of prediction without trajectory data. You know, how can you know that a dart is going to hit the bullseye on a dartboard unless you know where the dart is and unless you know where the dartboard is? If you don't have the data for either, you can't make that prediction.
Exactly. But I just want to add a bit to it also. The 9th of September was given for the date for Nibiru to hit Jupiter. Okay, so that is basically tomorrow.
Okay.
So
well,
you have one day.
Yeah, I can assure everybody that if there was such an object as Nibiru within our solar system right now, then it would be clearly visible. And you wouldn't require infrared to see it, because it would reflect visible light just like any other planet, comet, or asteroid or moon does. People make this claim that Nibiru would only be visible in infrared because it's a brown dwarf. Well, it is true that we image brown dwarfs in infrared, and there's a very good reason for that. It's because the nearest brown dwarf is actually so very far away from our sun, which is the only source of light in our solar system, that it does not reflect any visible light for it, or enough visible light for it to be seen. So we have to use infrared to image it. If an object such as Nibiru was within our solar system, it would be close enough to the sun to be reflecting visible light, just like all the other planets, moons, asteroids, and comets do. I've imaged Pluto through a 14-inch telescope in optical light. I didn't need to use infrared. Now, the nearest brown dwarf is actually 6.5 light years away from our sun. That's over 2 light years further away than the nearest sun, the nearest star, which is 4.3 light years away in the Alpha Centauri system. So it's 6.5 light years away. Then the nearest brown dwarf is even further away than the nearest stars to our sun.
Exactly. And you know, the other thing is too, if Nibiru was going through the inner solar system, its apparent size is supposed to, and mass is supposed to be 3 to 75 times the mass of Jupiter. Now, if that were true, which it is not, and it was coming through the solar system, it would be actually pulling, because of its magnetic field and sheer mass, it would be pulling the Kuiper belt with it, along with it, and it would also be pulling the asteroid belt just beyond Mars with it as well, and that there would be directly aimed toward the Earth. And basically, it's simple. We would not be here today at all. We wouldn't be speaking in this hangout about it, full stop.
No. Now, also, Jupiter, go ahead.
Sorry, Daz, I was just going to say also, if it was coming through the solar system, it would hit one of the big 4 planets, either Neptune, Uranus, Jupiter, or Saturn. Again, because we have...
not necessarily, because there's a lot of open space out in the solar system. It's a pretty vast place, but it would certainly show its presence. And you can see here, I've just pulled up the info for Jupiter, okay? And you can see down here that it has a mass of 317.88 times the mass of the Earth. And if we're talking about an object, which is, I think the figure that I recall seeing is for a brown dwarf supposedly 13 to 80 times the mass of Jupiter. So if we're talking somewhere between 13 and 80 times the mass of Jupiter, and Jupiter is already 300, what did I say, 317, nearly 318 times the mass of the Earth, you're talking about a really very massive object with a huge gravitational pull, and it would certainly perturb the orbits of the planets. We would know it's out there, and as you say, if it was within our inner solar system, as claimed by Dr. Claudia Albers, as she calls herself, the rogue physicist, and her sponsor, Scott from Nibiru Planet X News. As you quite rightly said, we wouldn't even be having this conversation if there were brown dwarfs next to our sun or within our inner solar system, because everything would be thrown out. The total solar eclipse that happened last month, 21st of August, that would have been completely thrown out, but the timings and everything as predicted were exactly as they were predicted to be. So, that also makes some nonsense of this claim that we've got this brown dwarf or heavy mass object passing through our solar system.
Exactly. And, the orbits of all the planets in the solar system have been stable for millions of years.
Yep. Well, we can go back so far that I think that's probably a statement that can be challenged based on our short history and so on. But I mean, we certainly know that for thousands of years that things have been stable. And I think there's a good case to be made for what you say. But there are things that happen. A couple of the planets have got a pretty strange sort of orbital tilt, and they believe that this may have been something. Even our own moon was supposed to have resulted from a collision with another object which they called Thea, and which collided with the original Earth and threw all this debris up into space, and then the debris sort of came together and created our current moon. That's the current thinking on how our moon formed. And look at the surface of the moon and how cratered it is. I actually did a bit of research the other day on Earth asteroid impacts, and there are at least 190 impact craters that we are aware of on the Earth. Now, of course, most of the surface of the Earth is covered by oceans, so we don't see the impact craters. And for the rest of the surface that is land, you've also got forestry, deserts, you've got erosion and so on. So many of those impact sites are either hidden or have been eroded away as well. But certainly 190 impacts that we are aware of. And when we look at the moon, we see how cratered it is. So, there are things that come through and hit the Earth and hit the moon from time to time. And it certainly could happen again in the future. There's no ruling that out. But as for the claim that there is a Nibiru Planet X within our solar system right now, then no, it isn't. Hi, Sean. I've got Paul Anon in the Hangout with me. Thanks for joining me. I see you've responded there, Paul.
Yeah.
Thank you, April.
There's another question there, Dazza. Hang on a second. If I can just find it. Oh yeah, I want to go back to what the question we asked earlier from R Flat. How does the September 23rd alignment compare to the 5th of the 5th, 2000 alignment? And was the end of the world?
Okay, are we talking about a planetary alignment there? I'm assuming that we are.
Yeah, I'm assuming that also.
Okay, all right. Let me pull up another window and we'll look at that.
Now, it's like I said earlier, planetary alignments, they don't all align up in one big straight line. And again, if they did, it wouldn't have any effect on the Earth. If you look at the moon, it doesn't have any effect on the Earth apart from controlling the tides. So it doesn't affect us in any other way whatsoever.
Okay, so this is the view of the solar system. We're looking top down as of right now. Looking out to Neptune, Uranus, we've got Saturn, and I'll zoom in here. And so the red one is Jupiter, and then Mars, got the Earth, Venus, and Mercury. Let me turn on the orbit for Mercury. There we go, and the Sun right there. Notice how offset Mercury is there around the Sun. Okay. So let me zoom out. So what was that date?
It was hold on 1 second. It was the 5th of the 5th, 2000.
2000.
Yeah.
Okay. So May the 5th. This is UTC. So let's have a look.
I don't think your page is sharing in the YouTube Hangout.
Okay. Yeah, it is actually. I'm looking at the live feed. Just let us know in the chat if you can see it, please. I'm seeing it in my live feed on my laptop.
Yeah, I just see it now. It's just popped up.
Okay. All right. So we've got, this is May the 5th, year 2000. Neptune, Uranus. We've got Saturn over here, Jupiter there. So as we can see, there is no particular alignment on that date. So we have an alignment with Saturn, Jupiter, and Venus there. But as Paul has correctly pointed out before, is that even when the planets are aligned, for example, looking top down, so if I go from Saturn through to Venus, it looks like we've got an alignment between Saturn, Jupiter, and Venus. But if we stood on Venus and actually had a look along that line of sight, you would find that Jupiter or Jupiter and Saturn are not aligned in 3D. And so before I change that, excuse me, before I change that view, just keeping an eye on the chat there. Have we got the right date that we're talking about, or is it a different date?
Yeah, it definitely says 5th of the 5th, 2000.
Okay. No one ever talks about Chiron. I don't know why there would be an issue about Chiron. That's not something I've heard of before.
Somebody else has just put here, Data Junkie, 5th of the 5th, 2005.
2005. Yeah, I thought there was a 2005 in there. Yep, I'll pull it out. So there's the orbit of Chiron, and it's way out there. Okay, that's at 2000. That's not current. So let's change this to 2005, and it's the current view for May the 5th, 2005. Okay. And as you can see, the planets are all over the place again. There's nothing special about anything there. You do get 3 or 4 planet apparent alignments fairly regularly. Some of you have gone way back with me in my debunking history might remember that my very earliest videos started out debunking the bar caroller, or the bar corolla, however you say it. From Australia, who, I don't know if he's still going, I think he is, posting Planetary Alignment Watch, Earthquake, what does he call them? Planetary Alignment Earthquake Watch videos. And he was using a piece of software originally called SimSolar. And he would show in his charts these alignments of the planets and make earthquake predictions based on those alignments. Well, the problem was, he was using SimSolar incorrectly with the orbits of the planets all evenly spaced. And as you can see here, the orbits of the planets are not all evenly spaced, but he was using the default view, which made it easy to show it all on one screen without having to zoom in to see the inner planets like I have to do here. So he was drawing these straight lines between the planets when in fact the orbits weren't even correctly spaced, and his alignments actually didn't exist in most of his videos. So there he was making earthquake predictions on alignments that didn't actually exist, which is hilarious. So I think there was another point I was going to make about the bar corolla and all of that, but
I just want to step in quickly. I Am Groot says, is the current alignment of the planets affecting the strongest recorded hurricane presently about to whoop on Florida? Now, no, Groot, that there is a big no, because currently there is no planetary alignments happening.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big fat no. And if anything was going to affect the Earth, if this is a very important point for people to remember, if planetary alignments could affect the Earth in the way being suggested, such as causing hurricanes or earthquakes or volcanic eruptions or whatever, then this would happen, in fact, every 2 weeks. Because we know the gravitational effects of the moon, which is only 384,000 kilometers away, affects the ocean tides. It pulls this this tide of ocean up in the air, and so we get high tide and low tide approximately every 12 hours. And that is the effect of the gravity of the moon and also the sun as well. So, you know, if the planets could cause hurricanes and earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, then every 2 weeks at new moon and at full moon, I would expect that if life would be impossible on the Earth, there would be absolute catastrophes. There would be, the Earth would be ripped apart with violent earthquakes, and all sorts of things would be happening every 2 weeks because of the moon aligning with the sun and the Earth, and more so during a total solar or lunar eclipse, when they are in fact in a perfect alignment. Because normally, of course, at new moon and full moon, the sun, the moon, and the Earth are not in a perfect alignment, which is why we don't see an eclipse every new moon or full moon. And you know, it's very interesting whenever there is a total solar eclipse or a total lunar eclipse. I always find it very interesting to see what sort of earthquakes are happening around the world. And we certainly don't see a tide of earthquakes, which is what we would expect if the moon had more of an effect than just causing the tides.
Exactly.
So I hope I've made that point very clearly, that if the planets could cause earthquakes and hurricanes and things like that, then the moon would cause absolute catastrophe every 2 weeks. Yeah. So are there any other alignments that I need to check while we're looking top down here? We looked at 2000, we looked at 2005, and we found that there were no particular alignments there.
I don't see anything, Dazza, in the chat. No, I can't see anything.
Well, I might just address then about these hurricanes. And we've got this massive hurricane, Irma, and we've got another one brewing as well, which is looking like it's going to be pretty bad as well. So what's going on there? Is the climate changing? Yes, it absolutely is changing. There's no doubt about that in my mind. It's got nothing to do with any mythical, invisible, imaginary planet that nobody can find in our solar system, Nibiru Planet X. It's nothing to do with that. It's got everything to do with our climate change. Now, our CO2 levels, carbon dioxide levels, have passed the 400 parts per million level, and is continuing to increase. And I had actually intended to pull up a particular video which actually is very good and compares all the things, asking the question is, what is causing climate change? Is it because of deforestation? Is it because of the ozone? Is it because of sunspot activity? All these different things, and there's only one thing that actually matches what we're seeing, and that is the increase in CO2 levels. And as the atmosphere warms, this is the important thing that people have to understand, is that hurricanes and tornadoes are driven by heat. And this is why the hurricane and tornado season are in the warmer months, not in the colder months. You don't get the hurricanes in the middle of winter. Okay? So yeah, so they're in the hurricane season at the moment because hurricanes and tornadoes need energy to drive them. It's a huge amount of energy required to drive a hurricane. And as the climate warms and as the oceans warm and the oceans give off that heat, they're actually providing the energy to drive these hurricanes. And this is why we're seeing more intensive hurricanes and more frequent hurricanes and tornadoes. In fact, just in the last couple of days, there was a destructive tornado here in New Zealand, and we almost never get tornadoes here in New Zealand. We do get them now and then, but they're not a common occurrence. And the other thing that happens with heating, of course, as everybody knows, heat causes evaporation. The more heating you've got, the more evaporation that you have. The more evaporation you have, the more moisture content you have in the air. And moisture content, of course, is what leads to precipitation and rainfall. So the more heat, the more evaporation, the more water content in the atmosphere, the more rainfall, the more flooding and landslips and things like that. Now, as everybody knows, Dazza the cameraman hates fearmongers and is not into fearmongering. I do believe that the climate is changing, and I do believe that we're going to see more extreme and frequent weather events as we're seeing right now. I believe that this will be the new normal, and I think people should be prepared for it. Consider where you're living. I certainly wouldn't want to be living on a floodplain. So, you know, there's some things like that that people probably need to think about as the climate is changing, what they can do to make sure that they are safe, that they're not going to be living somewhere that's going to be flooded out, or they're not living on the side of a hillside that might slip away. Doesn't sound very nice, but I think that these are realistic and honest things to be considering.
Yeah, I totally agree there, Dazza. Charlotte asks the question, do you think they're geoengineering our weather? And Paddy Daly basically asked the same question, Dazza, do you believe in weather modification?
Yeah, there is limited weather modification. I can remember my father telling me when I was a little boy about cloud seeding. So cloud seeding has been going on for decades, and you know they seed the clouds to cause rainfall, but that's a very localized thing that absolutely does go on. There have also been other considerations about a more widespread global sort of weather modification, where they've considered things like spraying particulates into the atmosphere to reflect heat away to prevent global warming. But when they looked at those things, they found that it was going to cause more problems than it would solve, and they also looked at how effective it would be and all that sort of thing. So yes, I believe in weather modification on a very limited scale, such as cloud seeding, and also during the Olympics in, was it China or Hong Kong? Just trying to remember, where they had all the smog a few years back, and they actually used these cannons to fire explosives up into the air to actually cause rainfall and to clear the air, and they actually had quite a good effect doing that as well. But again, that is localized. As for using weather modification to create hurricanes and so on, as some people are claiming even in the chat here that they use HARP to cause hurricanes, the amount of energy required to drive a hurricane, well, I'll tell you what, if they were firing up HARP to try and create a hurricane, it would be lights out for the rest of the planet, I think, to drive the amount of energy required to do that. Yeah, exactly. And HARP is, people have a lot of misconceptions about what HARP is and what HARP isn't. But no, I don't believe at all that the hurricanes that we're seeing and the tornadoes even here in New Zealand have anything to do with deliberate weather modification, such as HARP or chemtrailing or anything like that. It's got everything to do with the fact that the climate is changing due to increased CO2 levels, which causes warming, and it is heat that drives hurricanes. And as I pointed out, the hurricanes and tornadoes always occur in the warmer months rather than, for example, in the middle of winter when it's cold. You've got hurricane season because of the heating and so on. So, yeah.
Yep, Dazza, we have another couple of questions here. It says, Dazza or Anon, is there any truth to NASA only checking rocket engines in the Gulf, not messing with weather in the Gulf as reported in the BBC report? As far as I'm aware, rocket engines are actually being tested in Florida also, and not just in the Gulf.
Yeah, I don't know too much about that. Astronomy Live would probably be a good person to talk to about that, because he likes to go and watch the rockets being launched, and he probably knows a thing or two about the testing as well. But as far as I know, and I'm certainly no expert on it, I believe that they do rocket testing in the US as well.
Yeah, they do. They do rocket testing in the States. It's not just confined
Yep.
to the Gulf. What you're saying
Right.
about the messing with the weather in the Gulf, as reported in the BBC, I have not seen that, so I cannot answer that, Groot.
Right. I've possibly it could be if they're doing rocket testing in the Gulf, it could well be affecting the weather, though, in the same way that contrails, ordinary aircraft contrails, do create artificial cloud. And if you remember that after the September 11 attacks, all the aircraft were grounded for a period of time, and the skies actually cleared. And it's got nothing to do with chemtrails, it's got everything to do with contrails. As everybody knows who has breathed out their breath on a cold winter's morning, and you see that mist on your ear that forms in the cold air, or you start your car, you see all the steam coming out the exhaust pipe. It's the same thing with aircraft. They're burning fuel. They're at high altitude where the temperature is freezing. And when that moisture from the fuel that they're burning comes out the exhaust, just like out the back of your car, it produces this vapor, or these contrails, which freeze, because it is below freezing in the upper atmosphere. So it freezes into ice crystals.
Yep.
And those ice crystals are in fact cloud. So contrails produce artificial cloud. And just like any cloud, the cloud can spread out across the sky. And as it spreads out across the sky, then it's going to have reflective effects on the weather. So in some ways, it may actually help to mitigate global warming to some degree by actually reflecting away some of the sunlight. But we've also got the CO2 increasing in the atmosphere, which is causing warming. So, yeah, so quite possibly with rocket tests, it certainly does pump out a lot of moisture content and so on from the fuel. But, I won't pretend to be an expert on that side of things. I'm just sort of giving you my thoughts on that.
Yeah. Also, Raymond B asks, Dazza the cameraman, your thoughts on CERN?
Yeah, I really don't know too much about CERN. So I know that there are all sorts of claims made about CERN, just as there are about HARP and all sorts of other things. So, yeah, I can't really comment on something I don't know too much about. So, yeah, I won't try and answer anything on that.
Yeah,
I know people have concerns about them creating a black hole that's going to swallow the Earth, or opening up the portals of hell, or something like that. So, yeah.
Yeah. There was another question there, Dazza, from Elvis. Dazza, do you believe that in the near future we will experience deep cold winters?
No, I don't actually. But I have to qualify that, because even with global warming, you still get extremes, and we do see this. We've been seeing this in recent years. So I guess the answer to that is yes and no. You get more extreme summers and heat and record high temperatures, and you also get record cold, heavy snowfall, freezing temperatures and so on, which, as I say, we've been seeing in recent years. And my understanding of this, and again, I'm not a meteorologist, I'm not an expert on it, but my understanding is that it's rather like a heat pump. So if any of you have got a heat pump or air conditioning, you know that you've got hot on one side and cold on the other, right? And the weather systems on the Earth, you've got summer in the northern hemisphere when it's winter in the southern hemisphere, and vice versa. And in some regards, it's a bit like a heat pump. So you've got hot and cold. But overall, the temperatures are warming, global warming, So we're getting record high temperatures, but we're also getting record high average temperatures, global average temperatures. And this is what's actually driving the hurricanes and tornadoes that we're seeing.
And also that there's, across the west of America, there's many fires on the go as well. And it's getting harder that the hurricanes is getting at the moment.
Sorry, what was the last part you said about the hurricanes?
The hurricanes at the moment is getting more attention than the wildfire on across us also. Yes,
that's right. So yes, I have seen some coverage on our local television news here in New Zealand about these fires, and they're devastating fires. But of course, it is the hurricane that's getting all the attention at the moment. And also, India and Bangladesh were flooded too. Devastating floods just in recent days. But yeah, a lot of the focus tends to go on what's happening in the US with the hurricanes there.
Yeah. I got another question here for you, Dazza. Mathis Alves asks, Dear Dazza, what is that Google Sky hides behind the dark spot between Virgo's legs? People say it is the relations 12.
Yeah, it's actually, it's nothing hidden there. Anybody that's looked at Google Street View, for example, or looking down on Google Maps, will know that there are a number of errors in the images. There are stitching images, processing images, and so on. And Astronomy Live has done a very good video where he actually went and checked the original plates, photographic plates that were used in the sky survey. So if you go across to Astronomy Live's channel and check out his videos, maybe do a search on that. If I remember, I can try and put a link in the description area or in the comments. But the original plates, you can actually check that area of sky. The other thing that you have to remember is that the images in Google Sky are actually years and years old. They're not current. They were taken from the sky survey that was done years ago. But also, of course, there's nothing that prevents anybody with a backyard telescope pointing their telescope at that area of the sky, and even using an infrared camera, because infrared cameras are not confined to NASA or the government or the Vatican Observatory or anything like that. Anybody can go out and buy an infrared camera to use with a telescope, and they can use that to check that area of sky and see that there's nothing been hidden. So it's just a processing glitch. Astronomy Live goes into it in more detail in his videos, so I'll check that one out.
Yeah, Charlotte just asked a question there. Dazza, have there been any recorded weather anomalies with these particular alignments? Charlotte, the answer to that there is basically it will be probably no, because these alignments don't cause any problems with weather. They don't have any effect on the Earth. They don't have any effect on the orbits. You know, they don't affect the Earth in any way whatsoever.
That's right.
These alignments, yeah, and these alignments, as they're so-called, have been happening for thousands of years. So this is nothing new. And, you know, it basically, it doesn't have any effect on the Earth. Now, Daz, if you want to add anything to that, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think you've pretty much said it. You've answered that question correctly. You know, that question can be answered with an emphatic no. I know that there are some people that will dispute that, but I would also have to say that they actually don't understand what they're talking about when they make those claims. And I go back to the point that I made earlier, was that if planetary alignments could affect the weather on Earth, then we would expect the moon to affect our weather dramatically every 2 weeks from new moon and full moon, when the Earth, the sun and the moon are almost in direct alignment. And certainly every time there's a total solar or lunar eclipse and the sun and the moon and the Earth are in fact in direct alignment, and it just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
The only effect that the moon has on the Earth, of course, really is the ocean tides. There is some evidence that the moon does cause micro earthquakes, but there is no evidence of any increase in significant sort of earthquakes, anything above, you know, even magnitude 3 and probably less. And again, this is where my debunking all started all those years ago, debunking claims that there was going to be a massive earthquake here in New Zealand on the 20th of March, I think it was 2011, during the supermoon event. And I actually checked back on all the major earthquakes that had occurred here in New Zealand going back to 1843, I think it was, and checked them against the phases of the moon and found that there was no correlation whatsoever. So that completely debunked that claim.
Yeah. Yeah. Paddy asks again, have you also all noticed the weather chaos came right after the solar eclipse? Well, basically the answer to that question is, well, what's happening in the States right now with the hurricanes that just entered the hurricane season? So whether the solar eclipse was going to happen across the United States or not, the hurricane season was still going to come like it does every year anyway, so it doesn't make any difference. And the solar eclipse hasn't made any difference to the weather because, again, over this past few thousand years, the solar eclipse has been happening on a regular basis with no consequences to the Earth whatsoever.
Yeah. And with that comment in mind, let's have a look at this very fun website. This is called Spurious Correlations. If you Google Spurious Correlations, you'll find this website here. And it's all these ridiculous things that seem to correlate with each other. So what have we got? US spending on science, space and technology compared to suicides by hanging, strangulation and suffocation. So it seems that there is a direct link between suicides by hanging, strangulation and suffocation with the amount that the US spends on science, space and technology. We can see a definite correlation there, can't we?
Yep.
Yep. And the number of people who drown by falling into a pool, there seems to be a direct correlation with films that Nicolas Cage appeared in.
Yeah.
Number of people who died by becoming tangled in their bed sheets. Well, looks like a pretty strong correlation with per capita cheese consumption. I won't show the whole website here because they might want to get some hits on it, but go check that out, Spurious Correlations. Just Google that. And, you'll see that there's a very definite link between the divorce rate in Maine and the per capita consumption of margarine. So obviously the point there is that just because there may appear to be a correlation with some things, it doesn't mean that they are in fact linked. What's the old saying go? Correlation does not mean causation. I think that's how it goes. And
Yeah.
Omar asks, what about farting in your sleep and dying of suffocation? I think there could well be a correlation between those two.
That's what I was just about to say also. That's not what I was laughing at.
I wonder if that's got anything to do with cheese consumption as well.
Yeah.
Yep. So I think I might wind this up soon because we've been going for nearly 2 hours, and I generally try to keep the Hangouts down to about 1 hour. So it's been quite a good session. We've covered some very interesting questions and so on. And do you have anything else that you wanted to add, Paul?
I think we've basically covered everything there at the moment, but if anybody else has any other questions they want to ask quickly, please post them now.
Yeah, and just to go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, just could you do a quick reiteration on what you've been saying this evening?
Yeah. So just to reiterate, and the purpose of this Hangout was to look at the so-called sign in the heavens of Revelation 12 in the Bible, looking at how the constellation of Virgo is clothed with the sun with the moon at her feet and a crown of 12 stars giving birth to Jupiter. And after looking at this carefully, we found that this has actually happened at least 4 times in the last 1,000 years. And there's really no reason to think that this time should be any different to the other 4 in the last 1,000 years. But I guess that remains to be seen.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, I'm just going to say this again, the 23rd is going to come and go like any other year. And we'll be all speaking again on the 24th.
Yeah. You know, I would say if you're a Christian and you have Christian beliefs, then you'll know that as a Christian, you're called to be ready at any time. It's always good to be prepared. It doesn't matter what it's for, whether you're preparing for the possibility of a fire in your house. You might put smoke detectors in your house. You might have a fire blanket or a fire extinguisher. You might have saved water in case there's a natural disaster such as an earthquake or something like that. You know, we wear seatbelts in our cars. It never hurts to be prepared for any event. So, you know, yeah, if it's your belief that there's something about the 23rd, well, I guess it just doesn't hurt to try and do the right thing and be prepared. But I certainly wouldn't be going panicking about it. And, you know, some people are fearful about predictions being made. There's no Nibiru Planet X that's passing through our solar system. Nothing in regard to that is going to happen on the 23rd of September. If there was such an object heading our way, we would actually see it already. We would have seen it for months ahead of time. And if people remember Comet Elenin and Comet Ison, which were discovered many months before they were at their closest point to the Earth and closest point to the Sun, it would be no different to an object heading this way in space.
Exactly.
So, yep, go ahead.
Sorry, Daz, I was just going to say, just like you said, we would have seen it months in advance.
Yeah. Yep. The only difference is that sometimes you get smaller objects. You remember, I think it was in 2012 with the Chelyabinsk fireball that exploded over Russia. That came in from the direction of the sun, and it was obviously a much smaller object. So that meant that it was pretty much impossible to detect coming in from that direction. But it would be different with a large planetary-sized object, because it would show up for people in the nighttime side of the planet, when the object would be in the morning sky pre-sunrise or in the evening sky after sunset. A larger object would show up, but, you know, a smaller object coming in from the direction of the sun can take us by surprise, but not something like Nibiru, which is supposed to be several times the size of the Earth.
Yeah, exactly. And plus, it's just like we said earlier, if it was linked with the 23rd on the biblical prophecy and it was heading in our direction now, you know, guys, we wouldn't be here. It's as simple as that. We wouldn't be holding this hangout.
Yeah.
And we would be long gone.
Somebody mentioned the Skyview team further up in the chat. They have been well and truly debunked many times. If you haven't seen my videos on the Skyview team, just go to my playlist, check them out, and you'll see that they are a bunch of hoaxes who have been debunked many times.
Yeah.
So don't think you need to worry about that one.
Raymond B also said there, Dazza, please have another live chat on September the 24th.
Yeah. Well, remember too that New Zealand is actually on the first time zone for all of the world. So at the moment it's just coming up 1 p.m. on Friday the 8th of September here in New Zealand. I started this hangout at 2300 UTC, which is midnight UK time. So yeah, I'm ahead of the rest of the world. So if the world's going to end anywhere, I should know about it first, right?
Yeah, and then you can tell us afterwards.
Yeah, I'll let you all know. Yep. Okay, well, thank you for joining me, Paul. I appreciate your input on this, and thank you to everybody in the chat and for your questions, and for everybody who's watching. This is Dazza the cameraman, and we will do this all again very soon. And as you say, we'll have to have another one following up after the 23rd of September. So thank you all, and good night, and have a good day tomorrow.
Night, everyone.